Okay. Maamar Tetzaveh. We're at the end of Eis Hay. The last thing the Rebbe was discussing is from the sequence of the Maamar, the Friedrich Rebbe, it implies that the level of kosis lamor, kosis that makes the Mesiras Nefesh, reveals not only or but also the source of light, is he mixes in first to the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, Raya Mehemna. So he says that's an explanation, because who reveals that level of Mesiras Nefesh within the Jew, who reveals the level of kosis within the Jew, that's Moshe Rabbeinu. And he starts explaining there's two reasons why Jews believe, either because the neshama l'mayla sees Elokus, or because the neshama is Elokus. And he says, let's see this paragraph again. Now we can understand Kasha and Yonim Sheba Maamar, the sequence in the Maamar. She'inyan kosis lamor, that the inyan of kosis comes in continuation to the level of Moshe Raya Mehemna. What's the connection? Kizeh she'Moshe zon v'fanis emunah. Shedei b'pnimi is this, that Moshe Rabbeinu feeds the emunah, that it should be internalized, or they should megalis, that's a neshama, which is higher than mazlei al-chazi, more, which is higher than or. In other words, who reveals that level within the neshama of kosis? That's the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. In order to come to this origin of light is through the level of kosis of galus. He says, because ikar gili dasam and neshama, because the primary level of revealing the essence of the neshama is the level of Mesiras Nefesh, is primarily in the time of Gold. Sekel will explain. Okay, this is where we're up to Eizvav. The inyan is as follows. This, that the amun of the Yidden is in a way that he's ready to be Meiser Nefesh, who be'ik is primarily in the amunah that comes from Esem and Neshama. Okay? There's amunah that comes because the Neshama l'mayla sees Elokus, and then there's the essence of the Neshama. He says the primary level of Mesiras Nefesh comes from this higher level of amunah, this is the essence of the Neshama. Because mitzad amun and mitzad zeh shureya mazlai al-chazi alpha gagam shubateik of godol, even though it's very, very powerful. Like he said though, after shemitzad riya is amtes gedele b'yeser. In other words, he says like this: the lower level of amunah, which is also very high, the Rebbe says, is because the neshama sees Elokus. Now, seeing is believing, as the English expression goes. So even though that neshama l'mayla sees Elokus, which affects the neshama in the body, also to have amunah in Elokus, but he says kiven shamunah shemitzad siba, because he sees ve'nekshurim etzem and nemetziyusei. It's not connected to his essence, and a mocha sheyimsin nafshelzeh. It's not forced, or it's not proven that the person will be Meiser Nefesh. Meaning like this: giving up your life is only when it touches your core. If it comes from something because neshama sees Elokus, even though seeing Elokus is very, very powerful, but it's still cause of it, seeing Elokus. So it's not the same as Mesiras Nefesh that comes from the essence of the neshama, because real Mesiras Nefesh is when the essence is ready to give itself up, because the essence is Elokus. And the Rebbe says this explains halacha why, even though seeing is very powerful, the din is, the Rebbe quotes in the order at the bottom, a witness cannot become a judge, especially not in murder cases. In a murder case, if one of the judges saw the murder, they cannot testify. Or one of the witnesses cannot be a judge. Why? Because a judge has to be impartial. A judge cannot be biased. The fact that you saw it, there's no way somebody will prove to you that it didn't happen, and then you're not going to be impartial. So you can't be a proper judge. So he says, yes, it's very powerful, but still, something that's caused by something is limited in how much it's caused. He said, this, though that the person has amunah in a way that he's ready to give up his life, is ha'etzem sheli, this is me, and if it's me, I cannot deny the existence of Hashem. It's a very simple thing. Real Mesiras Nefesh is when it touches to your core. Meaning, because I am Elokus, I cannot separate myself from Elokus. I can't. It's just impossible. And Chassidus brings on another interesting, the Gemara says, an animal, even though it has no seichel, no rationale, it's only governed, dictated by instincts, an animal that jumps into a fire is a crazy animal. A normal animal cannot jump into fire. It doesn't have any rationale to understand you're going to get burned. It just can't be. So, if the neshama is elokus, it just can't kill itself by denying the existence of Hashem, and which is committing any sin. Based on this we can understand. What it says in the Maamar, this that Moshe Rabbeinu is Raya Mehemna Shuzonim, and find this as Amunah, that he actually feeds the Amunah. Is a Gamba Negelere Yisrael Shebechol Dor. It's not only this level of Moshe Rabbeinu, this level of Amunah, that the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation reveals the essence in the Jew, that it can't be any other way. This is not only the original Moshe Rabbeinu, it's Moshe Rabbeinu in every generation. Now what do they do? The role, that's why a Rebbe is called Raya Mehemna, the shepherd of faith. What is the role, bottom line, of a Rebbe? Is to strengthen the Amunah in that every Yid has. That what? Sheyamdu b'mesiras nefesh b'kima Torah mitzvahs. Okay? That they should keep Torah mitzvahs. He said, the l'cheira, zeh shemeish zanu mefanis Amunah. This, the Moshe Rabbeinu feeds Amunah. How does Moshe Rabbeinu feed Amunah? They can explain the Kamis, and in that Maamar itself of the Friedrich Rebbe, Aidei Shemashpia Yisrael, Das Belokus, Shayidei Zabo Amunah Beprimis. In a lot of places we learned also, it's not different, the Rebbe says. Other places it says, what's the role of Moshe Rabbeinu? To give Das, that Jews should feel Elokus. Like we learned in the recent Maamar, V'nasati Esav v'sotcha levemtecha v'yachaltav savata. Why is Moshe Rabbeinu saying, I am going to give grass for the animals when Hashem gives the grass? So the answer is, okay, the Medrash says when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke, he was Hashem's microphone. So when the microphone says, I'm going to give, it doesn't mean the mic, it means the guy speaking into the mic. So Moshe Rabbeinu, but therefore, Chassidus explains it deeper. When Nasati Esav b'sotcha, we learned there's neshamas that are called Behema and Adam. Behema has no feeling of Elokus. Neshamas of Zera Adam do. What's the role of Moshe Rabbeinu? To reveal Das, feeling of Elokus, even into those neshamas that on their own don't have Das. They're called Zera Behema. So it's explained that because he's Mamshir Das, he says, huh?
You said that is feeling?
Feeling.
Did you say that is feeling?
Yeah.
I thought it's cognition.
That's feeling. When you feel it, then you understand it. Is what? Shamuna, the Yisrael, Tiyabe'ef and the Mesiras Nefesh. Meaning like this. Moshe Rabbeinu reveals Das into the Yidden, and that causes the Jew to feel that they are an existence of Hashem, and that causes them to have Mesiras Nefesh. That's the role of a Rebbe in every generation. To bring Das, feeling of Elokus, into every single Yid, and through that, it affects them in a way that they have Mesiras Nefesh for Yiddishkeit. Based on this, we could explain what is the primary level of a Raya Mehemna. By the way, it's not called Raya Das, it's called Raya Mehemna. It's Amunah. The primary goal of a Rebbe is to reveal emunah, bring down emunah within the Jew in a way that he feels this is it. She'emunah lo tiyeh rak mitzad giluyim. That the emunah of the Jew should not, because the neshama sees the lower level of emunah, that the neshama sees elokus, mitzad zeh sheneshama l'mar ela mitzad etzem neshama, because of the essence. In other words, the primary role of a Rebbe is to reveal in every Yid that they are a part of God. They are elokus. And therefore, this that Moshe Rabbeinu reveals the emunah through Das and Hasaga is Tetzaveh, an offshoot of that he feeds emunah itself. In other words, this that Moshe Rabbeinu reveals Das to the Eden is an offshoot of the fact that he actually reveals the essence of the neshama of every Jew, like we said yesterday, in a way that the emunah is, they feel elokus. And what do they feel? I am godly, not God. Many people think they're God. That's not good. They realize they're godly, and therefore, by the way, it's another interesting point over here. And therefore, if I am godly, number one, it's impossible for me to separate myself from Hashem, because if that's me, and I give, and I don't do it, then I'm killing myself. Then I'm partially killing myself.
So we are our own
Or but a deeper level. Therefore, what comes out from this is, if that's the level that the Rebbe reveals within every neshama, then there isn't a thing a neshama can't do. Because if you're a chelik alakah, you reveal that you're godly, that's what you are, a part of God. So just say God, there's no impossible for God, there's no impossible for the Jew.
Therefore, all of us should be tzaddikim.
Well, you should try at least. Okay, now, like you said before, that how do you reveal emunah? In das is his kashas atzmis the etzem neshama, by revealing the connection between the essence of the neshama and Hashem. Based on this, it's like this. Now, okay, so what's the role of a Rebbe? The role of a Rebbe is to connect the Yidden to Hashem. Now, therefore, a generation that needed Mesiras Nefesh, what's the role of a Rebbe? To reveal the power of Mesiras Nefesh in the Yidden of that generation. If it's a generation that doesn't need Mesiras Nefesh, then a Rebbe is not going to reveal it because they don't need it. The role of a Rebbe, the Rebbe is saying, is to reveal the connection between a Jew and Hashem. If the connection needs to be only through Mesiras Nefesh, then that's what a Rebbe reveals. If not, not. In fact, like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, in Moshe Rabbeinu's generation, there was no need for the Jews to have Mesiras Nefesh. In fact, in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe asked the question, why is Moshe Rabbeinu say b'chol v'chol nafshecha me'yadecha? You have to have Mesiras Nefesh. In his generation, there was no need for Mesiras. What was getting in the way? There was no communists. There were no Hitlers. There were no. I mean, what did they need Mesiras Nefesh? They had all the revel. They saw godliness.
There was a Molech.
There was, but they didn't need Mesiras Nefesh in a day-to-day living with Amalek. So he says. So he says, so therefore those generations, the Rebbe is bringing out a point over here, that Mordechai, in a certain respect, was more Raya Mehemna than Moshe Rabbeinu.
More Raya.
Mehemna, more shepherd of Emunah. He said, the Bezesh HaDei Shehutzachim says, Navi B'Poel, Chizku Rei Yisrael, is Pashtus to the Moshe. As Emunah the Yisrael, that it should be Mesiras Nefesh, Nizgal ha'onyan the Raya Mehemna. Be'inyan zeh, in this aspect of Raya Mehemna, revealing the essence of the neshama for the power of Mesiras Nefesh, this is is even more Raya Mehemna than Moshe Rabbeinu himself in this aspect. Because Moshe Rabbeinu's generation didn't need Mesiras Nefesh.
And now think of the generation of the Rebbe after the Holocaust. How much more?
Yeah, and the Rebbe is speaking about the Friedrich Rebbe's time, that in Russia, communist Russia was pretty bad. Because again, he said before and he's explaining it again, the primary level of Kosis, of Ma'or, is revealed only through Mesiras Nefesh. If a generation needs it, that's what the Rebbe gives it. And the Rebbe is going to explain the different levels of Mesiras Nefesh. And the whole point of Tetzaveh is eventually the Rebbe explains Mesiras Nefesh of our generation, not the Friedrich Rebbe's generation. Friedrich Rebbe's generation was Mesiras Nefesh against communists, against this. Our Mesiras Nefesh is much more difficult because it's complacency of Golos.
America, Ashland.
It's nicht anders.
The Rebbe was like a doctor. He gave each person the dosage that he needed.
Correct.
It would have been too much, even if it would have been a good thing.
But there is,
anyway.
we mentioned this the other night, there is a klal and there is a prat. There is what a Rebbe does for Klal Yisrael in general, and then the Rebbe also does every individual Jew accordingly. So yeah, the doctor prescribes a medication for each person's illness. The Rebbe prescribes a medication for each person's spiritual illness. But in addition to that, there's what the generation needs. There's a general aspect of the generation.
The Rebbe's responsibility of the generation is given by above.
Yeah. That's why don't you have one Moshe Rabbeinu still alive today? I mean, think about it. He made a lot of miracles. He could have made the same Moshe Rabbeinu alive today. And Gendikt. But the answer is every generation, because it's a new generation, there's a different avoda than it was in the previous generation. So it's like, the Rebbe explains it in Sichas, Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't take the Jews into Eretz Yisrael. Because Moshe Rabbeinu, like he said, where do I get meat from? I'm a desert Jew, man. Well, he can't lower himself to that level. So therefore, when it came to taking the Jews into Eretz Yisrael, Deibishter made them, Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock, and because of that he was punished. Bottom line is, because the Jews to go into Eretz Yisrael, that leader had to be Yeshua. It couldn't be Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshua was an offshoot of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's a revelation of Moshe Rabbeinu in every generation. But it had to be a different Aved of a different Neshama in the Guf. I mean, same Neshama, but a different Guf, because every generation has their own unique Aveda that a previous Rebbe or Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not his thing. He couldn't do it. This is what this generation demands. Through Moshe and Mitzvah to the Leisha B'chol Dada, Iker is Galusa is Mesiras Nefesh B'Poyel. So therefore, the primary role of a Rebbe, of a Moshe Rabbeinu, is to reveal Mesiras Nefesh in the Jews. Therefore, those generations that need a Mesiras Nefesh, like he's going to explain, by Mordechai, by Haman, that was Mordechai in that respect more than Moshe Rabbeinu. He says, "V'inei Yeduam she'Mesiras Nefesh b'Pel al Torah mitzvah shekol Yisrael." Where was the Gzeira against all Eden of Torah mitzvahs is only in the day of Purim. Why? Because all the other Gzeiras, for instance, communism was in Russia, not in America. America wasn't affected by communism, or by keeping Torah mitzvahs from saying. In the Inquisition, it was in Spain. Where was there a decree against Jews universally? Achashverosh ruled the world. He was a king over 127 countries. Achashverosh was a king over the entire world, civilized world, obviously. And that means anywhere Jews were, they had the Gzeira of Haman. So where was the first time there was a decree against the entire Jewish nation? was in the days of Mordechai, in the days of Haman. This man, he says, because Shemesidus I Chanukah, he says no. Mesidus nefesh of Chanukah in the time of the Greeks was be'ikar b'matas Yoel, because they were the ones that had Mesidus nefesh against the Greeks. It was primarily them. Haman's Gzeira wasn't only against Mordechai, it was Am Mordechai. It was against all Eden. Vas Mesidus nefesh bizman Gzeiras Haman haise b'chol Yisrael. But the Mesidus nefesh of all Yidden basically was in the time of Purim. Based on this, we can understand what the Medrash says. When it says in the Maamar from the Medrash, the Medrash says, Mordechai in his generation went to Moshe. So the question is, listen, why doesn't it say that Shlomo was, David was Kamesha B'Deirei? Why does the Medrash pick on Mordechai? Because he says, Mikama ki isa b'medrash, shemordechai davka yishaku b'deirei kamesha b'deirei. It was only Mordechai, the Medrash says. It doesn't go through Yeshua and Sheftim and all the other guys. Why? B'shleim esham mailas the Mordechai Yehudi, shehaya reya mehem the begilu shekol yisrael sheb'deirei. Because the only one that was talking, the leader, even the Shlomo Melech, the Jews are out in. Who was the Rebbe of the whole generation? Was Mordechai. Bedugas Moshe Rabbeinu. Shem Sherdas L'Chol Yisrael Sheb'Deirei. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu was the Rebbe of his whole generation. So until Mordechai, you don't find a leader that was mamish, the leader of every single Jew. Kamuv and Gamizah Shederei Shel Moshe and all his generation are called Derdeya. A dar of Das in Alokus. Elo shebemesha yin gilui zeh yivadai mehem naidei shimshach das l'cholan shedeirin. Okay, so Moshe Rabbeinu was called Der Deya, a dar that had das in Alukut, but Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that revealed it. He says, Mordechai yigili inyan zeh. What was Mordechai's inyan? Shagili koyach mesidus nefesh shebecholan shedeirin. That Moshe Rabbeinu, Mordechai did it also, revealed, just like Moshe Rabbeinu revealed das to his generation, that they felt the lukus. Mordechai revealed the Kerech Mesidus Nefesh in his generation. And now he says, V'yeshleimat, Daidei shemevi b'mayma shekosid b'medrash, shemordechai b'deirei shakum u'kamesha b'deirei, this that the Friedrich Rebbe brings down in the Maamar, that Mordechai in his generation was like Moshe Rabbeinu in his generation. Aidei zeh pasuk bala Maamar sadin al atzmei. He paskin for himself, so to speak, unknowingly. Shuarayim mehem the begilish kol anshe adar. In other words, the Rebbe said the fact that the Friedrich Rebbe said the uniqueness of Mordechai was that he was the Rebbe of his generation. The Friedrich Rebbe ruled on himself that he is the Moshe Rabbeinu of the whole generation. Like the Rebbe says, you know, in 40, like the Mishnah we learned to pick your office, din v'cheshben, an accounting and a reckoning. First comes the reckoning, then you make the din. So he says no, because the person rules on himself unknowingly, like he says, shemidaita, shalei midaita, right? Hashem brings your case, and the person makes a ruling not even knowing that it's on himself. He makes a ruling about somebody else, and then Hashem says, you should know this is you. So the Rebbe said, by the Friedrich Rebbe saying that he is the Moshe Rabbeinu of the Mordechai was the Mordechai of the generation, that means that the Friedrich Rebbe is saying on himself that he's Mordechai in the generation, which obviously is clear that the Rebbe is saying on himself he's the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation.
And stronger than before.
Stronger than before because the Mesidus Nefesh that the Rebbe needs to deal with is much greater.
What do we do today, Rabbi?
You know, in the Yud Shvat Siches, the Friedrich Rebbe was Rebbe for 30 years. He became Rebbe in when his father passed away, Tuf Reish Pei, 1920.
1 year after.
No, the Friedrich Rebbe, Rebbe become Rebbes right away. The Frierdiker Rebbe's father passed away, Tafresh Pei, 1920. He was only child, so he definitely became Rebbe right away. And he passed away in 1950. So he was Rebbe for 30 years. The Rebbe said there was three decades. Okay, each decade had its own unique Mesiras Nefesh. 1920 to 1930, the first 10 years of his being Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, he had the Mesiras Nefesh that of against communism. Actually, from 1920 to 1930 was Mamash a fight against communism. From 1930 to 1940, when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Poland, he said the Mesiras Nefesh was, like it says, by Yosef, by Yikanu, by Echov, that his brothers were jealous of him, that the other Polish Rebbes were actually jealous of his Frierdiker Rebbe. Whatever, without going into what that means. And the last 10 years of the Frierdiker Rebbe's leadership, he was in America, Tavshin to Tavshin Yud, that America is nitandish, America is not different. Wow. And the Rebbe explains these are three distinct levels of Mesiras Nefesh. The first 10 years fighting communism for Yiddishkeit. In America, he didn't have to fight communism. He had to fight that America is not different. And in the middle was the dealing with the other Rebbes of the other Jewish leaders, basically. And the Rebbe explained, because the true definition of a Rebbe is whatever that time, not only the generation needs, whatever that generation needs is what the Rebbe does. The first 10 years he needed to fight Russia, he fought Russia. In that second generation he had to come up with the Shitas Chabad, which was different than everybody else's Shita. That didn't demand of Mesiras Nefesh. He did it, and he did. And you have the same thing in the Rebbe's decades of being a Rebbe. There was at different times. When the Rebbe became Rebbe in 1950, the Rebbe was fighting the fact of the Holocaust. The generation that came after the Holocaust, when people were saying, what's going on? Where's God? The Rebbe dealt with that. And then the Rebbe dealt in the different decades of the Rebbe's leadership. There were different issues. In Tavshin Lamed was me, Yehudi, who was a Jew, the law of return. There's a lot of issues. Anyway, don't forget, tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh.
We didn't study this one before.
Huh?
We didn't study this one before.
Why don't we do an algebra?
I will tell you.
Complacency of Golos. We're too comfortable in Golos.
So how do we overcome that?
Why do you think in a positive way? Why is there so much anti-Semitism?
Oh, so that's our...
Because people like